In the late 1980s, Grant Morrison took the helm of DC Comics' Animal Man, unleashing a groundbreaking run that would redefine the superhero genre forever. A young writer out of Glasgow, Scotland, Morrison has built a career on writing grand ideas that explore a character's entire history. Weird, metatextual, but somehow heartfelt. Morrison has continued to redefine characters for decades across Marvel, DC, and indie titles. However, Grant at his purest, quirkiest writing can be seen across the first 26 issues of Animal Man. Buddy Baker is a Hollywood stuntman who also happens to have amazing animal-themed powers. He can utilize these abilities by fully adopting the characteristics of any animal around him. Buddy can leap far if he's near a toad. He can hold his breath for extended periods when swimming with fish. He can even take to the skies and fly like a bird, though these abilities don't come naturally for him at first. Unlike many other DC heroes, Buddy is an everyman. He listens to REM on his Walkman when he's on missions. He quickly grabs lunch breaks on rooftops in between run-ins with Superman. Buddy has a beautiful 80s bombshell wife and 2 Simpson-esque kids at home. He even calls his wife to give her updates on work. What a classy guy he is. From early on, Morrison establishes Animal Man as a relatable hero, one who puts on the costume more so as a means of fulfillment and income than purpose and calling. The first 4 issues sets up the world of Animal Man well. Intended for a limited run, Morrison delves into Silver Age characters and tropes to tell Buddy's return to costume heroics. Unusual for comics at the time, you see Buddy struggle mightily with what initially amounts to street-level threats, but the scope shifts outwards when Buddy finds himself in the outback, engaging in, again, Silver Age-like combat. A staunch vegetarian, Animal Man refuses meat when offered and encounters many animal-related villains. Antagonist-turned-compadre team-ups also happen early on, and you get a vibe that Buddy doesn't really mess with the whole forced obligations that comes with being a superhero. By issue 5, Animal Man becomes a regular series, and Grant writes what turns out to be one of the greatest single-issue comic book stories ever told. Coyote Gospel. If you're a comic book fan, you've probably heard of Coyote Gospel before. I don't really want to go too deep into it because it's an experience that everyone should discover on their own. This is the issue that establishes Morrison as a big picture writer. He takes tropes and elements from the first 4 issues of Animal Man, condenses it into a mean-spirited filter, which sets up the rest of the 21 remaining issues on Grant's run. The comic book itself is really weird and you don't know how it fits into everything else in Animal Man, but by the end of the series, it all makes sense. Grant would explore this style of writing much more in his future work, but seeing it in its metaphysical nucleus during Animal Man is fascinating. If you have to recommend one comic book to somebody for a hero that they aren't very familiar with, suggest issue number 5, Coyote Gospel, and wait for their reaction. It'll be worth it. Thanagarians later show up, and the dread of Silver Age alien invasions starts to creep into the series. Here, Buddy is out of his league. Morrison uses this issue to tell 2 stories in parallel. The mental breakdown of an inexperienced hero when he realizes that regardless of all of his might, he's unable to save the world, and the relative peace that a suicide bomber embraces when he's finally completed his lifelong mission. The climax, with Hawkman coming just in time to simply switch off the planetary bomb, was a genius move that sets the tone for Buddy's psyche throughout the rest of Morrison's run. Red Mask, another Silver Age-inspired bad guy, approaches the final days of his life and decides to do heinous crimes to solidify his villain legacy. Buddy can see through this and tries to reassure the grandpa to call off his robots and not commit suicide. As Buddy flies off, Red Mask decides to jump after all and falls to his death. Seeing the old man reflect on his life and regret his career choices was sad, but poignant and relatable. Like Moore, Miller, and Grell around the same time, Morrison really wanted to deconstruct what it meant to be a hero, and he could do so by breaking the fourth wall or blurring the lines of reality and fiction. Accompanying Morrison's genius was the artistic prowess of Chaz Trog and Doug Hazelwood, who brought Animal Man to life with their visually striking panels. The Baker family holds great importance throughout the story and are designed with a lot of distinctive features. Buddy wears many different expressions when he talks with Ellen, his wife, about the risk of being an animal rights hero. Cliff and Maxine, their children, also engage with the sudden changes in the household expressively. Cliff's body language towards his father when he throws out all the meat from the fridge is exactly how a teen would react. Maxine would have great significance in later runs of Animal Man, but has an air of peculiarity surrounding her during the early arcs. When villains threaten the Baker family's safety, Animal Man is quick to react, showing desperation and frustration from behind the goggles when trying to keep them safe. Morrison's run on Animal Man was a turning point in comic book narratives. He pushed boundaries and paved the way for more mature and introspective approaches to storytelling. In one issue, Buddy goes on a peyote-induced trip in the desert. He connects to the red, terminology that would be very important to Animal Man and DC lore over the decades to come. Buddy experiences visions that are far beyond human comprehension. I'm a psychonaut and do believe that mind-altering substances can be a benefit for some people. Seeing how Grant Morrison so accurately wrote a trip for a late 20s man and how he later decides to refocus his family life and his career journey because of that trip. For people who experiment, yeah, that is a realistic experience. I did go through something similar as well. Grant Morrison is such a touching writer. When Animal Man encounters a horrific event, he starts to descend into darkness. Meta moments begin to pop up. Buddy's psyche twists as much as the plot does. At times, you don't even feel like you're reading a comic book. Towards the end of Morrison's run, Buddy begins a journey to, again, save his family, taking him to parts of the world that not even Superman, Green Lantern, or The Flash have visited. It's here that Grant Morrison fully embraces his meta ideas and his genius is born. Therapy was a very popular trope for 90s and 2000s media. Mental illness had recently entered the global discussion thanks to returning vets, Cold War, financial crashes, and the globalization of society. Therapy was becoming more popular, and it wasn't a surprise to see comic book writers utilize it as a tool for their characters. Morrison's iconic therapy session showcased his ability to tackle complex philosophical concepts, leaving readers questioning the nature of free will and existence. Buddy speaks directly to Grant Morrison and questions him on everything: his animal activism, his origin, his family, what he's supposed to do next. This was an eye-opening segment that not only looked at the economics behind why comic book publishers were getting increasingly dark towards the end of the decade, but Morrison's own selfishness when it comes to his craft and how willing he is to mine a person's surroundings, fictional or otherwise, in order to tell his best stories. Comic characters are just toys for the writer to manipulate. Feelings be damned. Grant Morrison's run on Animal Man was a watershed moment, influencing subsequent writers and ushering in a new era of thought-provoking storytelling in mainstream comics. He took Buddy Baker, a forgotten hero from times past, and molded him into something more. He became a reflection of the reader's own struggles and questions about existence. Later writers would twist with Buddy's world some more, but for metafictional writing, nobody did it better than Grant.